Chapter 6. Elena spent the night in Max's hospital room, watching over her son while he slept off his concussion. Arya curled up in the chair beside his bed, one small hand resting protectively on her brother's arm, while Lucas stood sentinel by the window, his young face grave with worry that went beyond his years. "Mommy," Lucas said quietly as dawn broke over Silvermoon territory, "something bad is coming. I can feel it in the air." Elena looked up from checking Max's vitals, noting the tension in her 4-year-old son's shoulders. Lucas's empathic abilities had been growing stronger since they'd arrived in pack territory, and his predictions were rarely wrong. "What kind of bad?" she asked, though she dreaded the answer. "The angry man from the forest," Lucas whispered. "He's bringing others. Lots of others." Before Elena could respond, the hospital's emergency alert system began blaring. Red lights flashed in the hallways as the pack's warning sirens wailed across the territory, 3 long blasts followed by 2 short ones. The signal for external attack. "All pack members to defensive positions," Cameron's voice crackled over the intercom. "This is not a drill. Repeat, this is not a drill." Elena's blood ran cold. Marcus had made good on his threats. Max stirred in his hospital bed, his golden eyes fluttering open at the sound of the sirens. "Mommy, what's happening?" "Stay calm, baby," Elena said, her medical training taking over even as her maternal instincts screamed at her to run. "Lucas, Arya, come away from the window." But it was too late. Through the large hospital windows, Elena could see Marcus Steele's forces pouring through the tree line. At least 40 wolves in both human and shifted form, moving with military precision toward the pack's main compound. "Dr. Winters." Dr. Haynes burst into the room, his face pale with panic. "We're evacuating the hospital. Marcus Steele has declared a formal challenge, and his forces are targeting civilian areas." "Targeting civilians?" Elena's voice sharpened. "That goes against every pack law." "Marcus doesn't care about pack law," Dr. Haynes cut her off. "He's claiming that Damon has been hiding illegal heirs and that the pack's bloodline has been compromised. He's calling for a complete overthrow of leadership." Elena's stomach dropped as the implications hit her. This wasn't just about territory or pack politics. Marcus was using her children's existence as justification for war. "We need to get to the safe rooms," Dr. Haynes continued. "The evacuation buses are." His words were cut off by the sound of shattering glass as something massive crashed through the hospital's main entrance 3 floors below. Howls of rage and pain echoed through the building as the battle spilled inside. "They're in the hospital," Elena breathed, gathering her children close. Max tried to sit up despite his injuries, his young face set in determined lines. "I can fight," he declared, though he swayed dongairely on his feet. "You have a concussion," Elena said firmly. "None of you are fighting. We're getting out of here." But as they moved toward the door, it burst open to reveal Cameron Brooks. Except something was wrong with his scent. Instead of the familiar beta warmth Elena remembered, he smelled of deception and something darker. "Elena," he said, his voice oddly flat. "I need you and the children to come with me. For your own protection." Lucas stepped protectively in front of his siblings, his small face twisted with confusion and fear. "He's lying, Mommy. His feelings are all wrong." Cameron's expression hardened. "The boy is mistaken. We need to move now, before Marcus's forces reach this floor." "Cameron," Elena said carefully, backing toward the window with her children behind her. "What's really going on?" "What's going on," said a cold voice from the doorway, "is that our dear Beta has been playing a very long game." Elena turned to see Marcus Steele himself entering the hospital room, flanked by 2 of his warriors. But instead of attacking Cameron, they nodded respectfully to him. The pieces clicked into place with sickening clarity. "You," Elena breathed, staring at Cameron in horror. "You've been working with Marcus." Cameron's familiar face twisted into something unrecognizable. "For 3 years, actually. Ever since it became clear that Damon's obsession with his lost mate was making him weak and unstable." "The Luna's car accident," Elena said, understanding flooding through her. "You killed Isabella." "A necessary sacrifice," Cameron said without emotion. "Damon needed to be pushed to his breaking point, and Isabella's death accomplished 2 goals. It triggered his final cardiac episode and created the medical emergency that would bring you back to Silvermoon." Elena felt sick. "You orchestrated all of this. My return, the children's exposure. I needed Damon's secret heirs revealed to justify Marcus's challenge," Cameron confirmed. "The pack would never accept a coup against a legitimate alpha king. But an alpha king who's been hiding his true offspring while mating with political pawns? That's different. Cameron. Damon's voice cut through the room like a blade. Elena turned to see the Alpha King filling the doorway, his face a mask of betrayal and rage. Tell me this isn't true. Hello, old friend, Cameron replied calmly. I was wondering when you'd arrive. 20 years. Damon's voice was raw with disbelief. 20 years of friendship, of brotherhood, of standing at my side through everything. 20 years of watching you make decisions that weakened our pack. Cameron cut him off. 20 years of watching you pine for a woman who couldn't even give you heirs, while better alliances fell through because of your emotional instability. She did give me heirs, Damon snarled, his wolf rising to the surface. 3 of them. Yes, well, that was an unexpected complication, Cameron admitted. But it works out better this way. Marcus gets his territorial expansion, I get beta position in the new pack structure, and everyone wins. Everyone except the innocent people you're willing to kill for power, Elena said, moving closer to her children. Innocence is a luxury we can't afford in pack politics, Marcus replied smoothly. Your children are powerful, Dr. Winters. They'll make excellent additions to my pack once their unfortunate father is removed from the picture. Over my dead body, Elena snarled, her own wolf finally rising after years of suppression. If necessary, Marcus said with a shrug. The hospital shook as something exploded in the lower levels. Through the windows, Elena could see Silvermoon wolves fighting desperately against Marcus's superior numbers, but they were losing ground fast. Mommy, Arya whispered, tugging on Elena's sleeve. We have to help them. The pack is hurt. Elena looked down at her daughter and saw something that made her heart race. Arya's eyes had gone completely silver, and power was radiating from her small frame in waves that made the air shimmer. The children are awakening, Marcus observed with satisfaction. Stress often triggers premature alpha abilities. How convenient. Lucas stepped up beside his sister, his own eyes now blazing with golden light. You heard our pack, he said in a voice that carried impossible authority for a 4-year-old. That makes you our enemy. Even Max struggled to his feet, swaying but determined, his presence suddenly filling the room with the kind of dominance that made grown wolves submit. Remarkable, Marcus breathed. They're all going to be alphas. I've never seen natural power like this. And you never will again, Elena said fiercely. She looked at Damon, seeing her own protective fury reflected in his golden eyes. Can you get us out of here? The main corridors are blocked, Damon replied, his attention split between his children and his treacherous beta. But there's a service elevator that leads to the basement. From there we can reach the underground tunnels. How touching, Cameron said dryly. The family reunited in crisis. Unfortunately, none of you are leaving this room. He shifted mid-sentence, his wolf form larger and more powerful than Elena remembered. Marcus's warriors followed suit, filling the hospital room with snarling predators. But they'd made a critical mistake. They'd underestimated what a mother would do to protect her children. Elena shifted for the first time in 5 years, her wolf form smaller than the male's, but blazing with protective fury. She positioned herself between the threat and her triplets, every maternal instinct screaming for blood. Damon shifted beside her, his massive black wolf moving to flank her in a protective formation they'd perfected during their mated years. For a moment, it was like no time had passed at all. 2 wolves united in defense of their pack. The battle was swift and brutal. Cameron lunged for Elena, but Damon intercepted him mid-leap, the 2 wolves crashing through the hospital room's interior wall in a tangle of claws and fangs. Marcus's warriors split up, one going after Damon while the other targeted Elena. Elena dodged the warrior's attack, using her smaller size and speed to stay ahead of his claws while looking for an opening. But her real attention was on her children, who were pressed against the far wall, their eyes wide with terror and something else, awakening power. Stay back, she barked at them, but it was too late. The warrior attacking Elena got lucky, his claws raking across her flank and sending her crashing into the medical equipment. As she struggled to regain her footing, the wolf turned toward her children with predatory intent. That's when the triplets stopped being ordinary 4-year-olds. Max shifted first, his wolf form easily twice the size it should have been, and slammed into the warrior with enough force to crack the hospital's reinforced walls. Arya and Lucas followed, their combined attack coordinated with a precision that shouldn't have been possible for untrained pups. The warrior didn't stand a chance. Within seconds, he was down, 3 small wolves standing over him with expressions of protective fury that would have made adult alphas think twice. My children, Marcus breathed, his wolf form backing toward the door. They're even more powerful than I imagined. Elena shifted back to human form, ignoring her nakedness as she moved to check her children for injuries. They were all unharmed but vibrating with residual adrenaline and the aftermath of their first real shift under stress. "Are you hurt, Mommy?" Arya asked, her silver eyes still glowing with power. "I'm fine, baby," Elena assured her, though blood was seeping from the claw marks on her side. Damon emerged from the rubble of the wall, dragging Cameron's unconscious wolf form behind him. He shifted back to human form, his face grim with the aftermath of betrayal. "Cameron's alive," he reported, "but he won't be causing any more trouble. The warrior's down too." Marcus, still in wolf form, was backing toward the door. But before he could escape, Lucas stepped into his path. "You can't leave," the 4-year-old said calmly. "You hurt our pack. You hurt our mommy. That means you have to face justice." "Justice?" Marcus snarled, his wolf voice carrying the authority of an alpha. "From a pup?" "Not from a pup," said a new voice from the doorway. "From me." Alpha Richardson entered the room with a dozen Crescent Moon warriors, but instead of supporting Marcus as Elena had expected, they surrounded him with weapons drawn. "Marcus Steele," Richardson announced formally, "by the authority of the Pack Council and in witness of your crimes against Pack law, I place you under arrest for the murder of my daughter Isabella and the unlawful invasion of sovereign Pack territory." Marcus shifted back to human form, his face twisted with rage and disbelief. "You were supposed to be my ally." "I was your ally when I thought Damon had betrayed Pack law by hiding his heirs," Richardson replied coldly. "But when I learned that you orchestrated my daughter's death to create a power vacuum, that alliance ended." Elena stared at the man who'd threatened her children just days ago. "How did you?" "Your son," Richardson said, nodding toward Lucas. "The boy has a gift for truth-seeing that cuts through deception. When he told me about his dreams of a car accident that wasn't really an accident, I started investigating. Cameron's betrayal became obvious once I knew where to look." The sound of approaching footsteps echoed through the hospital corridors as Silvermoon warriors arrived to take Marcus and Cameron into custody. The battle outside was winding down, Marcus's remaining forces surrendering once word spread that their leader had been captured. Elena sank into a chair, suddenly exhausted from the adrenaline crash and loss of blood from her wounds. "The Pack," she said urgently. "How many casualties?" "Surprisingly few," Richardson reported. Marcus's plan relied on surprise and psychological warfare rather than brute force. "Most of our people will recover." "I need to help them," Elena said, starting to stand despite her injuries. "I'm a doctor." "You're a wounded mother who just fought to protect her children," Damon interrupted, moving to support her. "Let me take care of the Pack for now." Elena looked up at him, seeing genuine concern in his golden eyes along with something deeper, a respect that hadn't been there 5 years ago. "The Pack will need medical attention," she insisted. "Then we'll work together," Damon said simply. "If you're willing." Elena glanced at her 3 children, who were watching the exchange with intense curiosity. They'd just fought their first battle, displayed powers that defied explanation, and proven themselves worthy of the Blackwood bloodline in the most dramatic way possible. "We'll help," she said finally. "But not because of what we were. Because of what we choose to be now." As Pack medics arrived to treat the wounded, and Elena began organizing triage efforts, she caught sight of her reflection in a broken window. The woman staring back at her wasn't the broken Luna who'd fled Silvermoon 5 years ago, nor was she the purely human doctor who'd built a new life in Seattle. She was something else entirely, a mother, a healer, a warrior when necessary, and finally completely herself. And for the first time since returning to Pack territory, Elena realized she was exactly where she belonged. Chapter 7. Elena had been treating wounded Pack members for 3 hours when the delayed shock of her own injuries finally caught up with her. She'd just finished suturing a deep gash on a young warrior's shoulder when the world suddenly tilted sideways, and she found herself gripping the edge of the medical table to stay upright. "Dr. Winters?" The warrior she'd been treating looked up at her with concern. "Are you all right?" Elena pressed her hand to her side, feeling the warm wetness that had been steadily seeping through her makeshift bandages. In her determination to help the Pack, she'd ignored the severity of her own wounds from Marcus's warrior. Now her body was making it impossible to continue ignoring them. "I'm fine," she started to say, but the words came out slurred. The hospital room spun around her as her body finally gave in to blood loss and exhaustion. "Damon!" someone shouted as Elena collapsed to the floor. "Get Damon! Now!" The last thing Elena saw before consciousness fled was her 3 children's faces, their golden eyes wide with terror as they watched their mother crumble. Aria was crying, Max was trying to push through the crowd of adults to reach her, and Lucas was standing perfectly still with an expression of devastating understanding that no 4-year-old should ever have to wear. Elena woke to the steady beep of cardiac monitors and the familiar antiseptic smell of a hospital room. But something was wrong with the sounds around her. The beeping was too fast, too irregular, and she could hear urgent voices speaking in the medical terminology she knew so well. Extensive internal bleeding from the claw wounds. Blood pressure dropping despite transfusions. Cardiac stress from the mate bond trauma. That last phrase cut through Elena's foggy consciousness like a blade. Mate bond trauma. Her heart wasn't just struggling with blood loss. It was responding to the phantom pain of their severed connection. The same condition that had nearly killed Damon. Elena. Damon's voice was closer than the others, filled with a desperation that made her want to comfort him even in her semi-conscious state. Elena, can you hear me? She tried to respond, but her body wouldn't cooperate. The anesthesia was pulling her back under, but not before she heard Dr. Haynes speaking with deadly seriousness. The cardiac damage is extensive. She needs the same surgery she performed on you, complete valve replacement and arterial repair. But Damon, I have to tell you, the success rate for this procedure on a severed mate bond victim is... Don't! Damon's voice cut him off. Don't give me statistics. Just tell me what you need. I need another surgeon. Someone with Elena's level of expertise. She's the best cardiothoracic surgeon I've ever worked with, but obviously she can't operate on herself. There was a pause that stretched too long, filled with the kind of silence that preceded terrible decisions. I'll do it, Damon said finally. Damon, you're not a surgeon. You don't have the training. I have something better, Damon interrupted. I have the mate bond. What's left of it, anyway? Elena's wolf will recognize me. Trust me in a way it won't trust anyone else. And I've been studying her surgical notes obsessively since my own operation, trying to understand how she saved my life. Elena wanted to protest, wanted to tell them that surgical expertise couldn't be learned from reading notes, but the anesthesia was winning the battle for her consciousness. Her children, she managed to whisper, the words barely audible. They're safe, Damon assured her, his hand finding hers with surprising gentleness. Cameron is in custody, Marcus is neutralized, and the triplets are with Sarah. I promise you, Elena, they're protected. Don't let them see. Elena's voice faded as the medication pulled her under, but not before she felt the phantom flutter of their old bond, weaker than a whisper but undeniably present. The surgery took 6 hours. Elena floated in and out of consciousness during the procedure, her wolf occasionally surfacing just enough to register Damon's presence at her side. In her drug-induced dreams, she was 19 again, lying beside him in their mated bed while he traced gentle patterns on her skin and whispered promises about their future together. But even in her dreams, the memories were tainted with the knowledge of what came after. She became aware of voices around her operating table, urgent and focused. Need to repair this valve first. Suction here, I can't see. Pressure's dropping again. And through it all, Damon's voice, steady and determined despite his lack of formal training. Easy, Elena. Let me help you. Let me fix what I broke. Elena's wolf responded to his voice, to the familiar scent and presence that had once meant safety and love. Her heart rate stabilized slightly, giving the surgical team the window they needed to complete the most delicate repairs. Remarkable, Dr. Haynes murmured. Her wolf is actually guiding the healing process. I've never seen anything like it. She's fighting, Damon said quietly. She's always been a fighter. In her semi-conscious state, Elena wanted to argue that point. The Elena who'd fought for their relationship, who'd begged him not to reject her, who'd believed that love could overcome anything. That woman had died the night he cast her out. The Elena who existed now had learned to fight for different things. Her children, her career, her independence. But her wolf didn't make such distinctions. Her wolf only knew that her mate was near, trying to heal the heart he'd shattered, and that was enough to keep her anchored to life. When Elena finally woke fully, it was to find all 3 of her children asleep in chairs beside her hospital bed. Someone had brought them blankets and pillows, and they were curled up together the way they always did when they were scared or uncertain. They haven't left your side, Damon's voice came from the corner of the room. Elena turned her head carefully. Everything hurt, but the sharp edge of cardiac distress was gone, and found him sitting in a chair by the window, still wearing surgical scrubs that were stained with her blood. "How long?" she asked, her voice hoarse from the ventilator. 18 hours since surgery. You've been in and out of consciousness, but this is the first time you've been truly awake." Damon stood and moved closer to her bed, his movements careful and respectful of the space between them. "How do you feel?" Elena took mental inventory of her body. The surgical sites ached, her chest felt tight from the procedure, but the underlying wrongness that had plagued her heart for 5 years was quieter. "Different," she admitted. "The bond, I can feel it." "It's healing," Damon said quietly. "Dr. Haynes says that sometimes surgical trauma can trigger the repair of severed mate bonds, especially when both parties are present and willing." "Willing?" Elena's voice sharpened. "I didn't consent to bond repair. I consented to life-saving surgery." "Elena, please." Damon held up his hands in a gesture of surrender. "I know you don't want this. I know you don't want me. But your wolf was dying from the separation, just like mine was. The bond repair is automatic. It's not something either of us chose." Elena closed her eyes, feeling the truth of his words in the subtle warmth spreading through her chest where their connection had once blazed bright. Her wolf was purring with contentment for the first time in 5 years, finally able to sense its mate again. But her human heart remained carefully guarded. "Mommy!" Aria's sleepy voice interrupted the conversation. Elena opened her eyes to find her daughter climbing carefully onto the bed, mindful of the various medical equipment. "Hi, baby," Elena said softly, lifting her arms so Aria could snuggle against her side. "Did you get some sleep?" "A little," Aria said. "But I was worried. Lucas kept saying you were going to be okay, but you looked so pale and still." Max and Lucas stirred at the sound of voices, both boys approaching the bed with the cautious manner of children who'd been badly frightened. "Are you really better?" Max asked, his golden eyes searching Elena's face for any sign of lingering weakness. "I'm really better," Elena confirmed, though she noticed Lucas studying both her and Damon with that too-knowing expression she'd come to recognize. "The bond is back," Lucas said simply. "I can feel it between you. It's not as bright as it should be, but it's there." Elena's breath caught. Her 4-year-old son could sense the mate bond connection that she was trying so hard to deny. "Lucas," she said carefully, "what do you know about mate bonds?" "Just what you told us in the stories," Lucas replied. "That sometimes people are connected by invisible threads, and when the threads are whole, they can feel each other's emotions." He looked between Elena and Damon with an expression that was far too mature for his age. "Is he really our daddy?" The question hung in the air like a challenge. Elena felt Damon tense beside her bed, waiting for her answer, while all 3 children watched her with the kind of focused attention that meant this moment would shape their understanding of their family forever. "Yes," Elena said finally. "He's your biological father. But not our daddy," Max said with the blunt honesty of childhood. "Because daddies take care of their children, and he didn't take care of us." Elena's heart clenched at the matter-of-fact way her son had dismissed Damon's parental role. But she also felt a fierce pride in Max's clear understanding of what family meant. "That's right," she agreed. "He's your father, but he hasn't been your daddy." Damon flinched as if he'd been struck. "I didn't know you existed," he said quietly, addressing the children directly for the first time. "If I had known, I would have." "Would have what?" Aria interrupted, her silver eyes flashing with an anger that reminded Elena powerfully of herself at that age. "Would have kept Mommy even though you called her defective? Would have pretended to love her just because she had your babies?" Elena stared at her daughter in shock. "Aria, where did you?" "We hear things," Lucas explained calmly. "Pack members talk when they think children aren't listening. They say you called Mommy broken and threw her away because you thought she couldn't have pups." "But she could have pups," Max added, his voice rising with indignation. "She had us. So you were wrong about her being broken, which means you threw away the best mommy in the world for nothing." Damon looked stricken, his face pale as he absorbed his children's assessment of his choices. "I made a terrible mistake," he said quietly. "The worst mistake of my life." "Mistakes can be fixed," Aria said, tilting her head in a gesture that reminded Elena of her own mannerisms. "But some things can't be unfixed. Like trust." Elena stared at her 4-year-old daughter, wondering when Aria had become so wise about the complexities of adult relationships. "That's right, sweetheart," Elena said softly. "Some things can't be unfixed. But some things can be rebuilt," Lucas said suddenly, his empathic abilities apparently picking up on currents Elena couldn't sense. Different than before, but still real. Elena looked at her son, then at Damon, Then at the three children who were watching this adult drama unfold with the kind of intense curiosity that meant they were forming opinions that would last a lifetime. Maybe, she said finally. But rebuilding takes time, and it takes trust, and most importantly, it takes proving that the person doing the rebuilding has really changed. She met Damon's eyes directly for the first time since waking up. I can feel the bond healing. I can feel my wolf responding to yours. But my heart, my human heart, remembers everything. It remembers being called defective, being cast out, being told I wasn't good enough for you or your pack. Elena, I'm not finished, she cut him off gently. It also remembers 5 years of building a life without you. 5 years of proving that I'm not defective, that I'm valuable and capable and worthy of love exactly as I am. I won't give up that knowledge just because our wolves are happy to be reunited. Damon nodded slowly, his golden eyes filled with a respect that hadn't been there 5 years ago. What do you need from me? Time, Elena said simply. Time to heal, time to figure out what this means for our children, and time for you to prove that you're the kind of man who deserves to be in their lives. And what about us? Damon asked quietly. What about the bond? Elena felt the phantom warmth of their connection, stronger now than it had been since her surgery, but still fragile compared to what they'd once shared. I don't know, she admitted. I honestly don't know if we can ever be what we were before. I don't want us to be what we were before, Damon said, surprising her. The man who rejected you was weak and afraid and too concerned with what others thought to trust in what we had. I want us to be something new, something stronger. Arya looked between her parents with the calculating expression she wore when solving difficult puzzles. Are you going to try to be a family? Elena glanced at Damon, seeing her own uncertainty reflected in his eyes. We're going to try to figure out what we are, she said carefully. All of us together. Good, Max declared with the satisfied air of someone who'd gotten the answer he wanted. Because we like it here. The other kids are strong like us, and nobody thinks we're weird for being fast or for knowing things. And Mrs. Sarah makes really good cookies, Arya added pragmatically. Lucas remained quiet, but Elena could see him studying Damon with that penetrating gaze that seemed to see straight through to a person's soul. What is it, sweetheart? Elena asked. He's scared, Lucas said simply. Not of us, but of disappointing us again. His feelings are all twisted up with sorry and hope and fear. Elena looked at Damon, seeing the truth of Lucas's words in the vulnerability he was trying to hide. Good, she said finally. He should be scared. That means he understands what he's risking this time. As her children settled back into their chairs and Damon returned to his corner of the room, Elena closed her eyes and let herself feel the slow, careful knitting together of the bond that had once defined her entire world. It felt different now, more cautious, less naive, tempered by pain and loss and hard-won wisdom. She didn't know if it would ever be enough to build a life on again. But for the first time in 5 years, she was willing to find out. Chapter 8. 3 days after Elena's surgery, she was finally cleared for release from the hospital. The pack had arranged a small celebration to mark her recovery and to officially thank her for her medical assistance during the crisis. Elena wasn't particularly interested in fanfare, but the triplets were excited about the party, and she couldn't deny them the chance to experience normal pack life. She was packing her few belongings when Dr. Haynes burst into her room, his face pale with panic. Elena, we have a problem, he said breathlessly. Marcus escaped during prisoner transport. Elena's blood turned to ice. How is that possible? Richardson's men were supposed to. Richardson's men were ambushed 20 miles from pack territory. 3 dead, 2 in critical condition, and Marcus is gone. Dr. Haynes moved to the window, scanning the forest beyond. But that's not the worst part. What could be worse than Marcus being free? He took someone with him when he escaped, Dr. Haynes said grimly. One of Richardson's daughters. A 10-year-old girl named Amy. Elena sank into the chair beside her bed, the implications hitting her like a physical blow. He's going to use her as leverage. That's what we're afraid of. Elena, you need to get your children and get out of here. Now. Before. The hospital's emergency alarm system screamed to life, but this time the pattern was different. 4 long blasts followed by 3 short ones. The signal for hostage situation. Too late, Elena breathed. Cameron's voice crackled over the intercom, but something was wrong with the transmission. It was distorted, filled with static, and Elena could hear sounds of struggle in the background. All pack members. Marcus Steele has, the medical center, demands to speak with, immediately or... The transmission cut off, leaving only the wail of sirens and the sound of Elena's racing heart. "Where are my children?" Elena demanded, adrenaline overriding the lingering weakness from her surgery. "Safe room with Sarah and the other pack families," Dr. Haynes assured her. "But Elena, you can't." Elena was already moving, ignoring the pull of her surgical incisions and the protests from her still-healing heart. "I need to get to them." But as they reached the hospital corridor, they found their path blocked by 3 wolves in human form, strangers wearing the tactical gear of mercenaries rather than pack members. Dr. Elena Winters, the largest mercenary, said with professional politeness. "Marcus Steele would like a word." "Tell Marcus he can go to hell," Elena replied, trying to push past them toward the safe rooms. The mercenary's hand shot out, faster than human reflexes should allow. "I'm afraid that's not an option. You're coming with us." Elena felt the sharp prick of a needle in her neck before she could react. The world immediately began to blur around the edges as some kind of sedative flooded her system. "What did you give her?" Dr. Haynes demanded, moving to support Elena as her legs gave out. "Just something to keep her calm during transport," the mercenary replied. "Marcus wants her conscious for their conversation." As darkness closed in around Elena's vision, her last coherent thought was a desperate prayer that her children would stay hidden in the safe rooms, that they wouldn't try to rescue her with powers they couldn't fully control yet. Elena woke to find herself bound to a chair in what appeared to be an abandoned warehouse on the outskirts of pack territory. Her head pounded from the sedative, and her surgical sights ached from the rough handling, but she was alive and relatively unharmed. "Ah, the famous Dr. Winters awakens." Marcus Steele's voice came from somewhere behind her. Elena turned her head as far as her restraints would allow and saw him emerge from the shadows, looking surprisingly composed for a man who'd just escaped from custody. "Where's the child?" Elena demanded. "Where's Amy Richardson?" "Safe for now," Marcus replied, moving to stand in front of her. "Though her continued safety depends entirely on your cooperation." "What do you want?" Marcus smiled, but there was no warmth in it. "What I've always wanted, control of the strongest pack alliance in North America. Your mate's territory, combined with Richardson's holdings, would give me dominion over half the continent. Damon will never surrender to you. Won't he?" Marcus pulled out a tablet, showing Elena a live video feed of the pack's main compound. "My sources tell me that our dear Alpha King has been quite emotional since your children's existence became known. Apparently, nearly losing you during surgery has made him rather protective." Elena's stomach clenched as she realized what Marcus was planning. "You're going to use me as bait." "More than bait," Marcus corrected. "I'm going to offer Damon a choice, his pride as an alpha or the life of the woman carrying his heirs." "I'm not carrying his heirs anymore," Elena said desperately. "The triplets are already born. Killing me won't accomplish anything." Marcus laughed, the sound sharp and dangerous. "My dear doctor, you really haven't been paying attention to pack politics, have you? Those children are powerful, but they're also only 4 years old. If something were to happen to their mother, they'd need a guardian, someone to guide their development and ensure they reach their full potential." Elena's blood turned to ice as she understood his true plan. "You want to claim them?" "I want to adopt them," Marcus corrected. "After their parents meet with unfortunate accidents, of course. 3 alpha-level children with Blackwood genetics, raised from childhood to serve my pack? It would be the foundation of a dynasty." "Over my dead body," Elena snarled, her wolf rising to the surface despite her restraints. "Well, yes," Marcus said pleasantly. "That is rather the point." Before Elena could respond, one of Marcus's mercenaries approached with a communications device. "Sir, we're receiving a transmission from the Silvermoon compound. Alpha Blackwood is requesting to negotiate." Marcus's smile widened. "Perfect. Put him through." Damon's voice filled the warehouse, tight with barely controlled rage. "Marcus, if you've hurt her." "She's unharmed for now," Marcus interrupted. "Though I can't guarantee that will continue unless we reach an agreement." "What do you want?" "Your unconditional surrender," Marcus said simply. "Step down as Alpha King, dissolve the pack alliance, and transfer all territorial rights to me. In exchange, I'll release Dr. Winters and consider allowing your children to live." There was a long pause, and Elena could practically hear Damon's internal struggle. She knew what this choice meant for him. Surrendering wouldn't just cost him his position, it would leave his pack vulnerable to Marcus's cruelty and strip him of everything he'd worked to build. "Don't do it," Elena called out, hoping the transmission would pick up her voice. "Damon, don't you dare sacrifice the pack for me." "Elena." Damon's voice cracked with relief at hearing her speak. Are you hurt? I'm fine, but you need to listen to me. Don't give him what he wants. The pack comes first. One of Marcus's mercenaries struck her across the face, hard enough to split her lip and make her ears ring. Enough! Damon's roar carried enough alpha authority to make even the mercenaries flinch. Marcus, I accept your terms, but I want proof that Elena and the Richardson child are both alive and unharmed before I sign anything. Of course, Marcus agreed smoothly. Meet me at the old stone bridge in 1 hour. Come alone, and bring the papers transferring pack authority. Any sign of backup, and both hostages die. The transmission cut off, leaving Elena alone with her captors, and the sinking realization that Damon was about to sacrifice everything for her. He's really going to do it, one of the mercenaries observed. Give up his entire pack for one woman. Love makes fools of even the strongest alphas, Marcus replied with satisfaction. It's going to be amusing to watch him grovel. But Elena wasn't thinking about Damon's surrender. She was thinking about her children, about the pack that had finally accepted her, about all the innocent lives that would suffer under Marcus's rule. And she was thinking about the slowly healing mate bond that connected her to the man who was about to destroy himself to save her. The bond that still carried more power than Marcus realized. The stone bridge spanning Silver Creek had been a pack landmark for over a century, a neutral meeting ground where disputes could be settled without bloodshed. Now it would be the site of either Damon's greatest defeat or Elena's last stand. Marcus had positioned his mercenaries in the forest surrounding the bridge, with Elena bound and gagged beside him on the structure's center span. Young Amy Richardson sat nearby, frightened but unharmed, her wide eyes fixed on the treeline where her father's rescue party might appear. Elena tested her restraints for the 100th time, feeling the zip ties cutting into her wrists. But she could also feel something else. The mate bond humming with quiet energy, growing stronger as Damon approached their location. He's coming, Marcus announced, checking his watch. Right on time. I do admire punctuality in a defeated enemy. Damon emerged from the forest alone, carrying a leather document folder, and moving with the careful, controlled gait of a predator forced into submission. But Elena could feel his rage through their bond, the fury he was barely keeping in check. The papers, Marcus demanded as Damon reached the bridge. Damon held up the folder. Transfer of alpha authority, dissolution of pack alliances, territorial rights assignments, everything you asked for. Now release the hostages. Not quite yet, Marcus said with false regret. You see, there's one more thing I require. Elena's heart sank as she saw the trap within the trap. I need you to formally reject your mate bond with Dr. Winters, Marcus continued smoothly. In front of witnesses for the official record. After all, I can't have any lingering romantic attachments complicating my new territorial arrangements. Damon went completely still, his golden eyes meeting Elena's across the bridge. She could feel his anguish through their connection, the impossible choice Marcus was forcing on him. The rejection will kill her, Damon said quietly. She barely survived it the first time, and she's still recovering from heart surgery. Yes, that is unfortunate, Marcus agreed with mock sympathy. But necessary for a clean transition of power. Unless, of course, you'd prefer I simply kill her now. Elena watched Damon's face, saw the exact moment when he made his decision. His shoulders straightened, and she felt a surge of love and determination flow through their bond. Not the love of a broken man accepting defeat, but the love of a mate preparing to fight. You're right, Damon said, his voice carrying clearly across the bridge. There is something that needs to be said about my mate bond with Elena. He looked directly at her, and Elena saw the truth blazing in his golden eyes. I, Damon Blackwood, Alpha King of the Silvermoon Pack, formally acknowledge that Elena Winters is my true mate, the mother of my heirs, and the Luna of my heart and pack. Marcus sputtered in outrage. That's not what I reject nothing, Damon continued, his voice growing stronger. I claim everything. My mate, my children, my pack, and my right to defend them all. Elena felt the mate bond explode back to full strength. 5 years of careful healing culminating in a rush of power that made her gasp even through her gag. But more than that, she felt her own strength returning, her wolf rising to answer his call. Kill them, Marcus snarled to his mercenaries. Kill them all. But Elena was already moving. The surge of mate bond energy had given her wolf access to power she hadn't felt in years, and the zip ties snapped like thread as she shifted. Her white wolf form was larger than it had been before surgery, brighter, blazing with silver light that made Marcus's mercenaries stumble backward in shock. Damon shifted at the same moment, his massive black wolf leaping onto the bridge in a single bound. Together, they moved like the mated pair they'd always been meant to be, their attacks coordinated with deadly precision. The battle was swift and brutal. Marcus's mercenaries were skilled fighters, but they'd never faced the combined fury of true mates defending their family. Elena's speed and Damon's strength proved an unstoppable combination, and within minutes the threat was neutralized. Marcus himself tried to run, but Elena cut off his escape route while Damon cornered him at the bridge's center. The would-be usurper found himself facing two wolves whose bond had been forged in fire and tempered by loss, and even his alpha-level power couldn't match their united strength. "Please," Marcus gasped as Damon's wolf pinned him to the ground. "I surrender. I invoke pack law." "You forfeited pack law when you threatened children," Elena snarled, shifting back to human form. "When you murdered Isabella, when you tortured innocent families for your ambition." She looked down at the man who'd caused so much pain and felt nothing but cold satisfaction. "But we're not like you, Marcus. We don't kill defeated enemies. Though we probably should," Damon added, also shifting back to human form. "Instead, you're going to spend the rest of your life in a council prison, thinking about what you've lost." As pack warriors arrived to take Marcus into custody, real custody this time, with Richardson's most trusted guards, Elena found herself alone on the bridge with the man who'd just chosen love over pride, family over power. "You could have died," she said quietly, not sure whether she was angry or grateful. "So could you," Damon replied. "And I wasn't willing to live in a world where that happened because I was too proud to fight for what mattered." Elena felt tears starting in her eyes, tears of relief, of exhaustion, of something that might have been forgiveness. "The children," she said. "Where are Mommy? Daddy?" Three voices called out in unison as the triplets burst from the forest, having apparently escaped from the safe rooms the moment the battle ended. They threw themselves at both parents with the fearless abandon of children who knew they were loved and protected. "We felt it," Lucas said breathlessly. "Through the bond. We felt when it came back all the way." "It was like fireworks," Arya added, her silver eyes bright with wonder. "All sparkly and warm." Max simply wrapped his arms around both parents' legs, holding on as if he'd never let them go again. Elena looked at Damon over their children's heads, seeing her own wonder reflected in his eyes. The bond between them was stronger than it had ever been, not the desperate, naive connection of their youth, but something deeper, tested by loss and tempered by the choice to rebuild. "So," Damon said carefully, "what happens now?" Elena considered the question, feeling the warm weight of her children against her sides and the steady pulse of the mate bond in her chest. She thought about the pack that had cast her out and then welcomed her back, about the life she'd built in exile, and the future she might choose to build here. "Now," she said finally, "we figure out how to be a family. All of us together as equals." "Elena," Damon said quietly, "I want you to know that I don't expect." "Stop," she interrupted gently. "I'm not doing this because you expect it, or because the pack needs it, or because the mate bond demands it. I'm doing this because I choose it. Because these children deserve to know their father, and because the woman I've become is strong enough to love without losing herself." She looked around at the pack territory that had once felt like a prison and now felt like home. "But I have conditions." "Name them," Damon said immediately. "We do this as partners. Real partners, not alpha and submissive Luna. I keep my medical practice, I keep my independence, and I keep the right to call you out when you're being an idiot." Damon's smile was the first genuine expression of joy she'd seen from him in years. "Done. And the children come first," Elena continued. "Always. Before pack politics, before territorial disputes, before anything else." "Agreed." Elena looked down at her three beautiful, impossible children, her miracles who'd brought her back to a world she'd thought was lost forever. "Then welcome to your second chance, Alpha King," she said with a smile. "Try not to screw it up this time." As the sun set over Silvermoon territory, Elena Winters Blackwood walked hand in hand with her mate and children toward the pack house where their new life waited. Behind them, the stone bridge stood as a symbol of what they'd overcome, the past they'd survived and the future they'd chosen to build together. The mate bond hummed between them, no longer the desperate connection of two halves seeking completion, but the chosen partnership of two whole people who'd decided that their love was worth fighting for. And in the pack house windows, warm light spilled out to welcome them home. Chapter 9. 6 months later. Dr. Elena Blackwood, she'd kept her chosen surname hyphenated with her mate's. stood in the renovated medical center, reviewing patient files with the same meticulous attention to detail that had made her reputation in the human world. The Silvermoon PAC's medical facilities now rivaled any human hospital, complete with the latest cardiac surgery equipment and a trauma center that served not just their PAC, but the entire supernatural community of the Pacific Northwest. "The council investigators want to speak with you again," Damon said, appearing in her office doorway with 2 cups of coffee and the slightly harried expression he wore whenever dealing with supernatural politics. "About Cameron?" Elena accepted the coffee gratefully, inhaling the familiar scent that had become part of their morning routine. "About the whole conspiracy, actually. They're finally ready to close the case, but they need your testimony about the medical fraud that started this entire mess." Elena nodded, setting down her files. The PAC Council's investigation into Cameron's betrayal had uncovered a web of corruption that reached far beyond Silvermoon territory. Dr. Marcus Chun, the PAC doctor who'd misdiagnosed Elena's fertility 5 years ago, had been taking bribes from ambitious betas and rival alphas for decades, providing false medical reports that could be used to destabilize mate bonds and PAC hierarchies. 23 cases over 15 years, Elena said, shaking her head in disgust. 23 women told they were infertile when they weren't, all to serve someone else's political agenda. "The council is offering reparations to all the affected families," Damon said. "Full financial compensation, public acknowledgement of the fraud, and mandatory fertility retesting for any PAC member who requests it." Elena felt a grim satisfaction at the news. Dr. Chin was already serving a life sentence in council custody, but knowing that other women wouldn't suffer, as she had made the long investigation worthwhile. "What about Cameron's sentencing?" Damon's expression darkened. 25 years for Isabella's murder, plus additional time for conspiracy, kidnapping, and treason against his alpha. He'll never be free again. The betrayal still stung, Elena knew. 20 years of friendship, erased by ambition, and the kind of cold calculation that had nearly destroyed their family. But Cameron's fate was no longer their concern. He'd made his choices and would live with the consequences. "Speaking of investigations," Elena said, "did Richardson ever find out who was feeding information to Marcus about our children?" "Jake Morrison," Damon replied with disgust. "Turns out he'd been struggling with gambling debts, and Marcus offered to pay them off in exchange for intelligence about PAC activities. He's been banished from all allied territories." Elena remembered Jake, the PAC member who'd been so amazed by the triplets' first shift in the forest. The thought that he'd been reporting their every move to Marcus made her feel sick. "The children don't know, do they?" "No, and they don't need to. Jake's gone, Marcus is in permanent custody, and our security protocols have been completely overhauled." Damon moved to the window, looking out at the PAC lands where their triplets were currently attending their first official PAC school. "They're safe now, Elena. Really safe." Elena joined him at the window, watching as Max raced across the playground with a group of older children, his speed carefully modulated to seem merely fast, rather than supernatural. Arya sat under a tree with several other girls, apparently teaching them to weave flower crowns with the kind of patient instruction that reminded Elena of herself at that age. And Lucas stood at the edge of the playground, quietly observing everything with those knowing amber eyes. "Lucas is still having the dreams," Elena said quietly. "About the accident that wasn't an accident. Dr. Rivera thinks they'll fade now that the truth has come out," Damon replied. "Knowing that Isabella's death has been properly investigated and avenged should help his empathic abilities settle." Dr. Sofia Rivera was the PAC's new counselor, specifically trained in helping young wolves process trauma and develop their supernatural abilities safely. All 3 triplets had been seeing her regularly, working through everything from their father's initial abandonment to the violence they'd witnessed during Marcus's attacks. "Arya asked me yesterday if we were going to have more babies," Elena said, unable to suppress a smile at the memory. Damon nearly choked on his coffee. "What did you tell her?" "That Mommy and Daddy are still figuring out how to be married again, and that any future babies would have to wait until we're ready." Elena shot him a sideways look. "Though Dr. Haynes did confirm that my fertility was never actually compromised. Apparently, wolf pregnancies can be delayed by severe emotional trauma, the moon goddess's way of protecting cubs from being born into unstable situations. So the triplets were conceived when they were supposed to be," Damon said wonderingly. "After we'd both learned what we needed to learn. After I'd learned to be strong enough to raise them alone, and after you'd learned what it cost to reject your true mate," Elena corrected gently. The moon goddess doesn't make mistakes, even when we think she does. They stood in comfortable silence, watching their children play with the easy confidence of kids who knew they belonged. It had taken months of careful integration, but the triplets were now fully accepted members of the pack, their extraordinary abilities seen as gifts rather than threats. "Elena," Damon said suddenly, "there's something else we need to discuss." She turned to study his face, noting the slight tension around his eyes that meant he was about to broach a difficult subject. "The Pack Council wants to formally recognize our renewed mate bond," he continued, "complete with public ceremony, official Luna installation, and all the political implications that come with it." Elena had been expecting this conversation. As Damon's mate and the mother of his heirs, her position in the pack hierarchy was significant regardless of ceremony. But making it official would cement their relationship in ways that went beyond personal choice. "And what did you tell them?" "That the decision was yours to make," Damon replied immediately. "I know you didn't come back here to be a political Luna, Elena. I know you've built a life and identity that has nothing to do with my pack status. If you want to remain Dr. Elena Blackwood, surgeon and mother, without taking on Luna responsibilities, I'll support that choice completely." Elena considered his words, thinking about the woman she'd been 5 years ago versus the woman she'd become. The old Elena had desperately wanted the Luna title as validation of her worth. The new Elena knew her worth was independent of any title or position, which, ironically, made her free to choose the role for the right reasons. "I'll do it," she said finally. "But not because the council expects it, and not because you need a Luna to maintain your authority. I'll do it because this pack accepted my children when they needed belonging, and because I want to use my position to make sure no other woman goes through what I went through." Damon's smile was radiant. "What do you have in mind?" "Medical reform, for starters. Independent oversight of all fertility testing, mandatory second opinions for any diagnosis that could affect mate bonds, and proper counseling support for women facing reproductive challenges." Elena's voice grew stronger as she outlined her plans. "I also want to establish a sanctuary program for rejected mates, somewhere they can go for support and resources instead of having to flee into exile." "The council will approve anything you propose," Damon assured her, "especially after they see the recommendations from your medical review board." Elena had spent the past 3 months leading an investigation into supernatural medical practices, uncovering systematic failures that went far beyond Dr. Chen's fraud. Her report had already led to major reforms in pack healthcare protocols across North America. "There's one more thing," Elena said, pulling an official-looking document from her desk drawer. "I've been offered a position with the Council's Medical Oversight Committee. It would mean traveling occasionally, consulting on cases involving medical fraud or malpractice." Damon's eyebrows rose. "Elena, that's incredible. The Council rarely offers positions to anyone outside their inner circle. They want expertise they can trust," Elena replied. "And apparently my reputation for calling out corruption has gotten their attention. Will you take it?" Elena looked out at the playground again, watching their children play with the security and joy she'd always wanted for them. "I think I will. It's a chance to make sure other families don't go through what we went through. And the triplets are old enough now to understand that Mommy has important work to do." As if summoned by their conversation, 3 small figures came racing across the playground toward the medical center. Max reached the door first, of course, but Arya and Lucas were close behind, all of them slightly out of breath and radiating excitement. "Mommy! Daddy!" Arya called as they burst through the office door. "Guess what happened at school? Mrs. Patterson says we're reading at high school level," Lucas announced proudly. "And I arm-wrestled Tommy Morrison and didn't even use my real strength," Max added with satisfaction. Elena and Damon exchanged amused looks. Their children were growing up fast, perhaps too fast, but they were growing up happy and confident, secure in their place in both the pack and their family. "That's wonderful," Elena said, gathering them close for hugs. "Did you have fun at school today?" "It was okay," Arya said with the diplomatic tone she used when she didn't want to worry her parents. "Though some of the older kids still ask weird questions about where we came from." "What kind of questions?" Damon asked, his protective instincts immediately alert. "Like why we smell different from other pack kids," Lucas explained. "And why we're so much stronger than we look." Elena sighed. Even 6 months later, the circumstances of the triplets' return to pack territory were still a source of gossip and speculation. Most pack members had accepted the official story, that Elena had been living in hiding with Damon's children, protecting them from threats that no longer existed. But curious children asked the kinds of direct questions that adults were too polite to voice. "What do you tell them?" Elena asked. "That our family is special," Max said simply. "And that special families sometimes have to do hard things to stay together." Elena's heart swelled with pride at her son's mature response. "That's exactly right, sweetheart. Are we going to stay special?" Arya asked with the kind of innocent question that cut straight to the heart of adult fears. "Are we going to stay together?" Elena looked at Damon, seeing her own emotional response reflected in his golden eyes. 6 months ago, she wouldn't have been able to promise her children permanent stability. Now, surrounded by the evidence of their rebuilt life, the medical center she'd designed, the pack that had embraced them, the mate bond that hummed steadily in her chest, she could finally offer them the certainty they deserved. "We're going to stay together," she promised. "All of us, for as long as you want us." "Forever then," Lucas declared with 4-year-old certainty. "Forever," Elena agreed, pulling all 3 children into a hug that included Damon and felt like the completion of something that had been broken for far too long. Later that evening, after the children were asleep and the pack house had settled into quiet contentment, Elena found herself standing on the balcony of the Alpha's quarters, looking out over the territory that had become home again. The full moon hung heavy in the sky, and she could hear the distant howls of pack members enjoying their monthly run. "No regrets?" Damon asked, joining her at the railing with 2 glasses of wine. Elena considered the question, thinking about the life she'd built in Seattle versus the life she was building here. "Some regrets," she admitted. "I regret that it took us 5 years and nearly losing everything to figure out how to be honest with each other. I regret that the children had to grow up without knowing their father. I regret that Isabella died for someone else's ambition." She paused, sipping her wine and breathing in the familiar sense of pine and pack territory. "But I don't regret the path that brought us here," she continued. "If you hadn't rejected me, I never would have learned to be strong on my own. If I hadn't left, I never would have become the surgeon who could save your life. If we hadn't been separated, we might never have appreciated what we have now." Damon moved closer, slipping his arm around her waist in the casual gesture of affection that had become natural again. "The moon goddess works in mysterious ways." "She does indeed," Elena agreed, leaning into his warmth. "Though I could have done without quite so much mystery." They stood together in comfortable silence, 2 people who had learned to love each other not despite their flaws and mistakes, but because of what those experiences had taught them about forgiveness, growth, and second chances. In the distance, a wolf howled, probably one of the younger pack members, drunk on moonlight and freedom. Soon, other voices joined in, creating the kind of harmony that spoke of community, belonging, and the wild joy of being exactly who you were meant to be. Elena felt her own wolf stir in response, no longer the broken creature that had hidden in the depths of her consciousness for 5 years, but a strong, confident presence that knew its worth and its place in the world. "Race you to the forest?" Damon suggested with a grin that reminded her of the young man she'd first fallen in love with. Elena returned his smile, feeling the years of pain and separation melt away in the face of simple happiness. "You're on, Alpha King. But don't expect me to let you win just because you're my mate." They shifted together, 2 wolves racing through the moonlight toward a future that was finally completely theirs. Epilogue. 10 years later. The Silvermoon Pack's annual Harvest Festival had grown considerably since Elena's return. What had once been a modest celebration for pack members had evolved into a supernatural community gathering that drew families from across North America. Children of all ages played in the moonlight while their parents shared stories, renewed old friendships, and celebrated another year of peace and prosperity. Elena Blackwood stood at the edge of the festivities, watching with the satisfied exhaustion of someone who'd spent the day organizing everything from the medical tent to the children's activities. At 38, she moved with the confidence of a woman who'd found her place in the world and made it better for her presence. "Mommy, come see what we made." Aria's voice carried across the courtyard, though it was deeper now than the piping soprano of her childhood. At 14, Elena's daughter had inherited her mother's healing abilities along with a strength that made even adult alphas treat her with respectful caution. Elena made her way through the crowd, stopping to check on elderly pack members, congratulate new parents, and exchange pleasantries with visiting dignitaries. Her role as Luna had evolved far beyond ceremonial functions. She was the pack's doctor, advocate, and the person everyone turned to when problems needed solving with both compassion and steel. She found Arya with her brothers at the craft tables, putting finishing touches on what appeared to be a family tree made from fallen autumn leaves. Lucas, now as tall as his sister despite being only minutes younger, was carefully writing names in elegant script. Max, broader and more muscular than his siblings, but still carrying that mischievous grin, was trying to balance the entire creation on one finger. "It's beautiful," Elena said, admiring their work. The tree showed 4 generations of Blackwood family history, with special branches for the pack members who'd become chosen family over the years. "We put Uncle Cameron on here too," Lucas said quietly, pointing to a small leaf placed slightly apart from the others. "Even though he did bad things, he was part of our story." Elena's heart swelled with pride at her son's mature understanding of complex relationships. Lucas had grown into his empathic abilities with remarkable grace, becoming the pack's unofficial counselor for anyone struggling with emotional trauma. His gift for seeing the full truth of people, their pain alongside their potential for growth, had helped heal more wounds than Elena's medical skills ever could. "That's very wise, sweetheart," she said, ruffling his dark hair. "Where's the new baby going to go?" Max asked, grinning at his parents' startled expressions. Elena's hand moved instinctively to her still flat stomach, where a 6-week-old pregnancy was carefully hidden beneath loose festival clothing. "How did you?" "Lucas dreamed it 3 weeks ago," Arya explained with the matter-of-fact tone she used for supernatural revelations. "He said you were going to tell us tonight, after the festival." "And I could smell the changes," Max added proudly. "Your scent's been different for days." Elena looked around for Damon, finding him across the courtyard in deep conversation with Alpha Richardson, who'd become one of their closest allies over the years. As if sensing her attention, Damon looked up and smiled, the warm, uncomplicated expression of a man who'd learned to trust in happiness. "Should we tell Daddy his surprise has been ruined?" Elena asked her children. "Nah," Max said with a grin. "Let him think he's being sneaky about the special dinner he planned for later." Elena laughed, marveling at how her children had grown into such remarkable young people. Arya was already showing interest in following her mother into medicine, spending her free time in the medical center, and displaying an intuitive understanding of healing that went beyond normal wolf abilities. Lucas had been accepted into an advanced program for young empaths, learning to use his gifts to help others while protecting his own emotional well-being. And Max, despite his strength and natural alpha tendencies, had surprised everyone by developing a passion for teaching, working with the pack's youngest children and showing infinite patience with their questions and struggles. "Dr. Elena," a small voice piped up from nearby. "Dr. Elena, look what I can do." Elena turned to see 5-year-old Sophie Chun, Dr. Marcus Chen's daughter, adopted by the pack after her father's imprisonment, performing a perfect cartwheel on the grass. The little girl had been struggling with feelings of shame about her father's crimes, but months of patient counseling and unconditional pack acceptance had helped her blossom into a confident, joyful child. "That's wonderful, Sophie," Elena said, crouching down to the girl's level. "Have you been practicing?" "Every day," Sophie declared. "Lucas taught me. He says practice makes progress, not perfect." Elena met her son's eyes over Sophie's head, seeing the quiet pride he took in helping younger pack members overcome their challenges. "That's very good advice." As the evening progressed, Elena found herself moving through familiar rhythms, checking on the elderly, mediating minor disputes, ensuring everyone had enough food and felt included in the celebration. These were the moments she treasured most, the simple acts of care that made a community into a family. She was helping clean up the children's activities when strong arms wrapped around her from behind, and she caught Damon's familiar scent of pine and leather. "How's our surprise?" he murmured against her ear. "Apparently not much of a surprise to anyone with supernatural senses," Elena replied, leaning back against his chest. "Though I'm impressed you managed to plan a romantic dinner without me noticing." "I have my ways," Damon said smugly. 10 years of marriage have taught me a few things about stealth." Elena turned in his arms, studying the face she'd loved for so long. At 35, Damon had grown into his leadership role with the kind of steady confidence that came from hard-won wisdom. The desperate, prideful young alpha who'd once valued appearances over love had evolved into a man who led with both strength and compassion. "Any regrets about baby number 4? She asked softly. "Only that it took us this long," Damon replied, his hand moving to rest gently on her stomach. "Though I suppose we needed time to figure out how to raise the first 3. They looked across the courtyard to where their teenagers were now helping pack up the festival decorations, moving with the easy cooperation that came from being raised as a unit rather than individuals competing for attention. "We did good," Elena said simply. "We did very good," Damon agreed. "Though I have a feeling this next one is going to keep us on our toes." "Why do you say that?" Damon's grin was pure mischief. "Because Lucas told me this morning that the baby is going to be different. More different than even the triplets." Elena felt a flutter of excitement mixed with apprehension. "Different how?" "He wouldn't say. Just smiled that knowing smile and told me we'd understand when the time came." As they walked toward home, their children falling into step beside them with the natural ease of a family unit, Elena reflected on the journey that had brought them to this moment. 10 years ago, she'd been a broken woman fleeing into exile with 3 impossible children and a shattered heart. Now she was Luna of the strongest pack alliance in North America, a respected doctor whose medical reforms had changed supernatural healthcare forever, and most importantly, a mother raising her children in a world where they could be exactly who they were meant to be. "Mommy," Arya said as they reached the pack house, "will you tell us the wolf story tonight?" Elena smiled at the request that had become a family tradition. "Which wolf story?" "The one about the Luna who got lost and found her way home again," Max said. "With the 3 little wolves who helped her remember how to be brave. And the alpha who learned that love was stronger than pride," Lucas added. "I think I can manage that story," Elena said, gathering her family close as they climbed the front steps together. Later, after the children were settled and she and Damon had shared their quiet celebration dinner, Elena stood once again on the balcony overlooking pack territory. The festival lights had been taken down, but the moon provided plenty of illumination for the wolves still running through the forest, their howls carrying songs of joy and belonging. "Happy?" Damon asked, joining her with 2 cups of tea. Elena considered the question, feeling the warmth of their renewed bond, the steady heartbeat of the child growing inside her, and the deep satisfaction of a life lived with purpose and love. "Completely," she said, and meant it with every fiber of her being. In the distance, a wolf pup howled its first tentative song, and the pack answered with voices full of welcome and promise. Elena smiled, knowing that somewhere in that chorus were the voices of her own children, adding their harmony to the song of family, home, and love that would never be broken again. The end. Thank you for listening to this story. Like, share, and subscribe for more.